Hello, everyone. Welcome to this meditation session from the Freer and Sackler. Today we are celebrating Nowruz, the Persian New Year, and we have a special painting from our collection to share with you. Today we will have a spotlight talk coming up first by Freer Sackler Chief Curator Masameh Farhad, who will introduce us to the artwork that we'll be looking at today. Following that, we'll have a 30-minute meditation session led by Phil Bender. Thank you, Philip, for joining us today. And then we'll have time for your questions at the end. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Masameh Farhad.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many of you. I have to say I've really enjoyed joining you in these sessions. Before I start talking about the painting that I've selected for everyone, I wanted to state something that is a little obvious, but I think we all have our own reason why we meditate. But by and large, it's an effort, or it's a way to encourage us to disconnect and to refocus our attentions and become centered. In many ways, I feel that the change of season also is sort of a way of meditating, or at least a reason to meditate. The days change in length, the light changes, and the natural world around us changes as well, and really does help us in many ways to focus and be centered. So I wanted to let you know that this Saturday at exactly 5:37 a.m. Is the beginning of spring, the vernal equinox. Now, many people around the world have celebrated this event for many centuries, but it has particular significance in Iran, much of Central Asia, as well as the Caucasus, where it's really the most important day of the year. In many ways, sort of Christmas and New Year sort of rolled into one. The day is called Nowruz, or New Day, and originated in Iran over 1,000 years ago. While traditions have changed over the centuries and each region developed its own rituals, the underlying principle have remained the same. It's a celebration of rebirth, renewal, and a new beginning as we humans witness nature transform all around us. And it's this harmony with nature that is so central to Nowruz. And in fact, it's celebrated for 13 days. And during this period, everybody dresses in new clothes, families and friends come together, they exchange gifts, eat, drink, converse, and spend as much time as possible outside and really sort of enjoying the charms of beauty of nature. So to give you a sense of the celebration, at least a flavor of what it's like for many of those who celebrate Nowruz, and of course, with many immigrants to the United States and Europe, Nowruz is also celebrated very much in the United States as well. So to give you a flavor of the sort of the ritual and tradition, I have chosen a painting for you here, which is sort of tucked away in a manuscript from the 16th century. It was created in the city of Bukhara, which today is in Uzbekistan, but in the 16th century, it was part of Iran. Now, this manuscript is a rhyming poem, and it's called Gift of the Free. It is made up of 20 discourses, and each discourse deals with a different moral and religious theme. But I want to take you through the painting first. What you see is a elegantly dressed couple seated on a beautiful carpet in nature. It looks rather sort of on the dry side, but you have a river sort of circling around the couple. And again, water is another feature that is very important in Nowruz and the spring ceremonies. Of course, you can see behind the couple is a beautiful tree. It's a flowering tree. Again, heralding the arrival of Nowruz. There are flowers around the river. Is not a river; it's a stream around the stream, and there are irises. Some of the flowers you recognize. Some are more generic, and if you go down to the bottom of the page, there are musicians who are playing as well. So you can almost sort of not only see the scene, this sort of wonderful contemplative scene in nature, but you can almost hear it. You can hear the water sort of gently sort of flowing in its bed. You can hear the music. And of course, the couple is also enjoying wonderful food and drink. There are blue and white bottles. There are gold vessels in front of them. So very much like as what you would do for Nowruz. They are outside. They are enjoying food, drink, conversation, and listening to music. And that is what many families would actually do during this 13 days that celebrates spring and the new year. Quickly to tell you about how these paintings are made, they are painted with gouache or watercolor on paper, and the pigments are made of the finest natural ingredients that are carefully ground down into a paste and made into paint. And it is said that in order to get some of the really fine details that you see in these paintings, artists would use either cat whiskers or the hair of the squirrel tail, because these hairs were both short, stiff, but also had enough flexibility for the artist. So this is how these paintings were created. And another perhaps characteristic that you can see here is that they don't necessarily look like real people. They are stylized and they are idealized. So so is the landscape. The landscape is very flat, and you wouldn't necessarily see like the stream the way that it's painted here in nature. But the whole point of Persian painting is to create this idealized world where everything is perfect, the sun is always shining, and you are surrounded by great beauty. Now, one of the reasons that the artist sort of strove for this type of composition is that, again, the goal was not to create the natural world. These paintings are illustrations to poems and poetry. So they work very much as illustrations to texts. And in that way, the artist had much greater leeway in creating his parallel world to the poems that these images are linked to. And if we look at either the top corner of this page, and we can see that there is actual text there. And what is wonderful with this poem, it really sort of emphasizes not only the role of the painting and what is depicted, but also the theme that I mentioned is really sort of critical to Nowruz, which is this harmony between us humans and the nature that surrounds us, and sort of encouraging sort of respect and contemplation of natural phenomena. So I'm going to read you part of the poem. It begins with the following: "The rose is not happy without the face of the beloved. Spring is not enjoyable without wine. The dance of the cypress and the swaying of the rose are not enjoyable without the sound of the nightingale. Gardens and roses are beautiful, but they're not enjoyable without the conversation of the beloved. Life is not pleasurable without an embrace and a kiss." So again, the celebration of nature, the celebration of our place in nature is absolutely critical, not only to this painting, but also to the celebration of Nowruz, the beginning of spring and the beginning of a new day. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the meditation session.
Thank you, Masume. That was wonderful. I look forward to hearing more about this work. Well, welcome everyone to the meditation portion. You know, this is such an honor for me to join you each month to look at a piece of work. And I especially enjoy the aliveness of the moment as we come together with curiosity and openness to whatever the work brings forward for us individually and collectively. Now, there's a tradition, as I understand it, that goes along with Nowruz and other occasions in Iran, especially the winter solstice celebration, of looking to particular work of poetry, the work of Hafiz, for insight into one's life, what might be lying ahead, or even to look into the book for some suggestion for a resolution to a particular wish. So in that spirit, I'm no expert in divination, nor I'm an expert in Persian poetry, but in that spirit of looking to the work and to the words for inspiration, may we look at this work and see what comes alive for us. Here's my basic plan. Let's get comfortable and prepare to bring our attention inward. So now, please close your eyes. And get comfortable. In a position that will allow you to relax a bit, yet remain aware. If you're seated and if it's appropriate for you, allow the spine to be tall, body relaxed. If some other position is suitable for you, don't hesitate to take that. Now, when we look to a piece of artwork or we listen to words for inspiration, it's helpful to get underneath the thinking mind a bit. And to do that, we might energize the body. So would you do that now? Would you firm your right arm and right leg. Just squeeze them, firming right arm, right leg, and then let go. And do that again. So the right side of your body, right arm, right fist, right leg, firming, maybe inhaling, holding for a moment. Exhaling, letting go. One more time, the right side of the body activated. Right leg, right buttock, arm, fist. Hold. And let go. And allow sensation to come to your conscious mind. Let the body speak to your conscious awareness. Let's try this on the left side, Firm your left arm, left leg. Maybe do it on inhalation, inhaling, holding, and exhaling, softening. Do that again, inhaling, firming the left side, so left leg, left arm. Holding a moment, letting go. One more time on the left side, firming left arm, left leg, inhaling, holding a moment, letting go. And as you let go, be aware of sensation arriving on your left side. Good. Now, the whole body. Firm both arms, both legs. Inhale. Hold for a moment. Squeeze. And let go. We'll do this just 2 more times. Inhaling, firming everything. Exhaling, letting go. One last time. Inhaling, body energized. And exhale. Release. Little by little, let the body unwind the tension while you're present to sensation. Soften the breath. Letting breath descend deep into the body. Our primary means of intuition lie in our center, between the arms, between the legs, inside the torso. Invigorate this area now with a deep inhalation, carrying your in-breath down, down, down into the belly. And then exhale. Repeat full, comfortable inhalation, down, down, down. Maybe that breath can even travel down to the pelvic cavity, that deep, your inner basement. Two more breaths in this fashion. Then let go of the breath, yet invite your attention to settle in behind the abdominal wall. Settle into that quiet space. Now, soon we will look at this work again, but before we do, let's check in with our other senses. Become aware of your hearing. The sounds around you. And the silence underneath the sounds. Become aware of your mouth and your tongue. Where taste arises. Become aware of your nose. Feel the touch of breath there. Or the sense of the natural world enter you. And feel the touch of air on your skin. Now gently open your eyes and offer your open sensory field to this work. To this work right here. As you gaze tenderly upon this painting, what is alive for you? What comes to you first? Let's look closely at some details. The upper right corner. And down to the right edge. listening from your body. What comes to you as you gaze at this female figure? Or the musicians? Musicians who are not just left without anything, but have a little treat. Flowers. This attendant holding something in his hands. What speaks to you from this work? The young boy to the left. The blossoming tree. And of course, the central figures. Senses open, body open. Be present for just a moment to this couple. The rose is not happy without the beloved's face. Spring is not enjoyable without wine. The dance of the cypress and the movement of the rose are not enjoyable without the sound of the nightingale. Garden and roses are beautiful, and yet they are not enjoyable without the conversation of the beloved. Life is not enjoyable without an embrace and a kiss. This concludes our meditation through the work. Take note of what came forward for you, and maybe that serves as a prompt for a question or contemplation for later. But thank you for your time. Peace to you all.
Thank you, Philip. That was so beautiful. Your question, as you gaze tenderly upon this painting, what is alive for you and what comes to you first, was really beautiful. And I just wanted to read some of the responses that participants were adding about that question. The beautiful calligraphy, the music, the sky and the flowering tree, the people speaking, the colors, the floral decorated carpet, the fact that everyone seems to be mindful, the calmness in the faces, the music and the colorful flowers, the small smiles. So thank you for looking so deeply at this artwork with us. And I'd like to invite Masume back now to speak with us again about the artwork. We got some really interesting questions in the chat. Some participants were wondering about the facial features of the people and commenting that they look perhaps Chinese or Afghan more than Persian, and just wondering about that. Masume, is that something you'd like to comment on?
Of course. I think that's a very good question. And this manuscript was done in Bukhara in Central Asia, in Uzbekistan, which is part of Central Asia. And also, these features would not be strange in Uzbekistan. They're also not strange in Iran. And we have to remember that the world was different in the 16th century. Borders were different. What we now call Uzbekistan was sort of part of Iran. There was a lot of back and forth. There's between areas, between regions. There was a lot of intermixing, and you do find even today you find Iranians with similar features. But now, as I mentioned in my presentation earlier on, the artist was not trying to create a realistic vision of the world. It's a stylized, idealized vision of the world. And in this idealized world, there are certain standards of beauty, like we have standards of beauty today. In the 16th century, for instance, whether you read poetry or whether you looked at paintings, what defined, let's say, female beauty was someone with almond-shaped eyes, with a mouth like a rosebud. And when you look at these figures, both men and female, they have those features. So again, these are based more on literary tropes than actual physical traits. But of course, the artist was inspired by, again, what he saw around him.
We had another question about the context of this artwork, and it was originally in a folio. Mm-hmm. Could you say a little bit more about what that means?
Yes. So when you talk about Persian painting or Persian miniature painting, what you're really talking about are paintings that are in books, they are in manuscripts. And one of the reasons that I tend not to call them miniatures, because there's nothing miniature about them. They're actually, some of them are quite large. And I sometimes that is misleading, but there are certainly images that are tied to a text within a book. And one of the reasons that we chose this particular view to give you that physical characteristic of this image, that it's not an independent image that you put on a wall, but it's part of a greater ensemble. And that is another feature of Persian paintings, that it's not independent, but it goes hand in hand with the text, with the calligraphy, with the book binding, with the gold margins that are painted around. It's really the book that is celebrated, and the painting is one part of it. It's an important part of it, but it's one part of this total, the whole of a manuscript.
Thank you for that. We had a comment that the painting mixes different perspectives, that we're seeing the carpet from above, but the people from the side. And that's one of the fascinating things about Persian painting. Could you tell us a little more about the perspective?
Again, that goes back to wanting to or aiming to create an idealized world rather than a naturalistic work. And it's actually, we have artists actually speaking about this phenomena in particular, that if they were to create a naturalistic world, they could only show things from one perspective. But that's not what they wanted. They wanted to show things from all sorts of different perspectives. Sometimes, this is sometimes in paintings, you see a house, you can see inside, outside, the side walls, and somehow in your mind, it all comes together. It's again, these are impressions. They're based in reality, but there are this other creative and idealized world. And in fact, many contemporary artists like Matisse, for instance, was very much influenced by Persian painting because of the way that the Persian artist organized space and combined different perspectives.
That's really fascinating. Were there any women artists making paintings at this time?
Yes, they were. In general, just sort of stepping back, for instance, we don't know who painted this work. Again, another feature of much of the painting tradition of the Islamic world, whether it's Iran, Turkey, other parts of the region, is that that works of art are rarely signed before, let's say, the 17th century. So we have very few names of artists. We know that these manuscripts were made in workshops, also outside the home, where people would come together. And in those public spaces, it was really men who would come together. But we also know that some of these manuscripts were created at home. And at home, within the familial circle, for instance, the husband would be responsible for the binding, the wife would be responsible for the painting, the daughter would be responsible for calligraphy. So it was almost sort of like a cottage industry for the production of some of these manuscripts. But unfortunately, we have very few names, female names of artists who have survived, We know that, for instance, if you were of an elite status, like princesses and other members of the ruling elite, you were taught how to paint, how to write, how to compose poetry. So we have some of some works by members of the royal female members of the royal family left, but not that many.
And who would have owned or had access to view this type of manuscript?
Again, that's a very good question. Sometimes we have inscriptions that say that this particular manuscript was made for a particular patron. But when you look at the just simply at the materials that would go into creating a manuscript like this, there is gold, there is silver. The water that you see is actually painted in silver, which is now tarnished. So it's this black color. There are these precious pigments. Clearly, it was an artist of skill. So a manuscript like this was a costly production. So not everybody could afford to have a manuscript like this. So it was somebody with certain amount of means. And the other thing that we need to take into consideration is that when you have books, like we have books today, they are small. They fit in your hands. I mean, some are larger, but in general, these are works that, again, were meant primarily for individual contemplation. Sometimes you would have a small group of people gathering and looking at paintings and looking at these manuscripts. But these works were really meant for the enjoyment of a few people. It's not like going to a museum and where many of us can enjoy these books on a wall. I mean, given the format, the way that they were used, it meant that it was the enjoyment of these manuscripts was much more personal and much more private.
Several people were mentioning the long sleeves, and in two of the figures, they can't quite even see the hands coming out of the sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us any more about that style of dress?
Yes, and actually, even today, if you look at some robes that are still traditional robes that are worn in Central Asia, they have, or Afghanistan, for instance, they have these very long sleeves. And one reason for that is it covers the hands, and it's a sign of humility to cover your hands. It also provides warmth, and so it's very practical. You can roll them up as necessary, or you can let them down. You can cover them, and if you're in front of somebody of importance, you cover your hands. If you need them, you uncover your sleeves. So it's both ceremonial as well as practical reasons that you have the long sleeves.
That's so interesting. Last question, just could you tell us anything else about the poem that you read and about the poet Hafiz?
Yes, well, I was delighted that Philip mentioned Hafez, because actually the poem that I read was by Hafez. And Hafez is sort of one of the greatest poets of not only of Iran but the region as a whole. He lived in the city of Shiraz, and what is remarkable about his poetry is that it can be read and interpreted on so many different levels. Many see, for instance, references to the beloved as a reference to God, as how you would strive unity with God. But at the same time, it could also be, a physical yearning for your beloved. So it really lends itself to many different interpretation. It's infused with great mysticism. He often talks about, again, wine and nature and beauty, and he's one of the greatest poets. And the unfortunate thing is that it is difficult to translate Hafez, and I guess it's with any translation of other poets. Some of the meaning is lost, and especially when the meaning is so esoteric that it's not concrete. So sort of capturing that essence is difficult. But he certainly is one of the greatest poets. And again, as Philip mentioned, his poetry is used for divination. This is also something else that was done or is done during Nowruz. You would open the book of Hafez to see what the year has in store for you, and you read it, and you would then interpret the poem.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and thank you both to Philip and Masume. Phil, if you have any closing words, feel free to jump back in.
Just want to wish Masume and Grace thanks for your knowledge, your expertise. And Masume, thank you for guiding us so beautifully through that work. It was a real pleasure to sit with this piece and to read the poetry. So that's all I have to say is that, as a person who's coming to this new, to feel the aliveness, it's a great, great opportunity. I'd love to share that all with all of you. What I would say now is, why don't we bow out to one another? If you'd like to place one hand on your heart, other hand on top, and offer each other peace, peace, peace.